Most people think that losing weight is all about cutting foods, counting calories, and spending hours in the gym. Do these things, and yes, you might drop weight temporarily, but without the right mindset and intention, you'll likely gain it all back. So, in this video, we're going to take you behind the curtain of Tammy's two distinct journeys, her weight loss journey and her weight release journey. There's a big difference between the two, so keep watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button and the bell to be notified every time we post a new video about herbalism, healing, and alignment.
I'm Tammy.
And I'm Selima, and we're co-founders of Iwilla Remedy, where we help you turn your health issues into non-issues from the inside out. We've taught thousands of students in our various programs how to heal and use herbal medicine and the Calypso healing method, which is our signature step-by-step process that helps you become aware of the behaviors that are holding you back and contributing to physical pain. Uncover their root causes in your life and make the choice to move forward and break this cycle so you can live the vibrant life that is your birthright. So Tammy, in our language, there's a difference between weight release and weight loss. Do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, there's a big difference. I don't say that I've lost weight or I'm losing weight because I didn't lose anything. I'm not looking for it. I didn't misplace my keys. I have released weight. And it's a release because it was conscious. I was conscious about saying, I no longer want this weight on, and I'm going to make these step-by-step process to release it.
And so let's back up and let's tell people, just give people the picture of your story. What's been your journey with weight release since the beginning, I guess?
So for weight release, it's really started in my early 20s. I think at my heaviest, I was close to 300 pounds. And I got, now looking back, I realize what my pattern was or has been over the years. And so I'd get to a point where the weight would get uncomfortable. I would be uncomfortable. I wouldn't be happy. Things would start to hurt. And so what I would do would be more of like this sweeping change, right? So the first time I got a personal trainer. I went to the gym. I remember I went to Costco and bought like 36 eggs, and all I ate was eggs. And the weight came down. I can't remember at that time how much, but I know that the weight came down. You know, fast forward a few years, you kind of find a middle ground. But the weight goes back up. I'd never gone back up to that weight, but the weight went back up to maybe, I don't know, let's say like 250 pounds, maybe 275, I don't know, something like that. So then you kind of fast forward to my late 20s, and the same thing happened again, right? The weight went up. I started getting uncomfortable. I couldn't move around in my body. I didn't like it. And so I got a personal trainer. I went to the gym, and this time I was a bit more intentional about the foods I ate. My personal trainer was fantastic. I released maybe about 100 pounds in a relatively short amount of time. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't necessarily changes that I could sustain, but they were changes that in the moment helped me get to the goal that I wanted. And then, you know, you kind of fast forward. And so life happens again. And the weight came back up. Again, I didn't go back up to the exact spot where I was, but it went back up. So this second time when I lost weight, I think I went from a size 22, 24 to a size 12. And I remember because that was the first time that I could walk into any like store. I remember at the time I walked into Gap and I could just buy pants off the rack, which was almost never my experience. Time goes by, the weight goes back up. At this point, I think I'm in my late 30s, like my mid 30s. And so my body size went back up. At this point, I stopped weighing myself. So I couldn't really tell you how much I weighed because I didn't want to know. I really wanted to live in a state of oblivion. But I do know that I was between like a size 16 and an 18. And I stayed there maybe until 42.
Yeah. And so why would you call that phase? This phase was your weight loss.
Yes.
Not weight release. We're not there yet.
We haven't hit weight release. Everything that I've talked about thus far was about weight loss because I wasn't present, and I didn't want to be present. I wanted the weight to come off, and I wanted the ownership to be on someone else's shoulders, which for me each time was always on whoever my personal trainer was at the time. I remember my last personal trainer, she was like, "We have to weigh you," and I was like, "Absolutely not." She's like, "How are you going to know what's happening?" And I said, "I don't care. I don't care," because I didn't want to know, and I wanted no ownership in the process. I wanted the weight to go from where it was to where I wanted it to be, and I wanted daisies and fairy dust and little birdies, tweeting over me, and then everything, in my mind, everything would have been right in my world. Once I hit whatever that size was, whatever that weight, everything would be right in my world. With that said, I never knew what that size was. Everything was always about how I felt in my body and what size clothes I wore. So if you go from a size, even if you go from like a size 22 to a size 16, you're going to feel changes in your body. But as I have learned, and we'll talk about when it came to a weight release journey, was that's not the end. Like there's more, but just because you find some space and some movement, for me, that's when I was like, oh, okay, I've arrived, but I still didn't feel like, I still didn't hear the birds chirping and the fairy dust and, all of that still didn't happen.
You still didn't feel good inside.
Right. I didn't feel good inside. Everything at that point for me was about external validation, right? So it was about people saying, oh, wow. And at this time they did. Right. Oh, wow, you've lost a lot of weight. Wow, you look great. And so, but that's going to sustain you for just so long. That's not for the long run. At least it wasn't for me. It held me for a little bit, and then it hit a point where you kind of wished that the shock and awe would stop. You kind of hit a point where you don't want to go out somewhere where maybe you're going to see people you haven't seen in a while, and you just don't want to hear it anymore. And so that was kind of my ebb and flow, because now I felt like I needed protection, and weight to me was always a means of protection. When I would be heavier, I would get less attention. I would, in my opinion, I would stand out less, and so it was easy for me to kind of.
It's like insulation. So now here we are. Okay, so it's 2019. You're at a size 16, not happy. You end up having this conversation with a neighbor, and tell us what happens from there.
Yeah. So she was like, "Oh, well, let's just go walking." And so I was like, "Okay." So we would meet every morning at 6 a.m. and we would walk our neighborhood.
During this time, you had a really pivotal conversation with her.
I don't know. I brought it up to her since. It was pivotal for me, and it wasn't even directed towards me, but I knew the message was for me. So we're walking, and she was saying, "Oh, I was talking to my doctor, and my doctor was saying if you haven't lost any weight, it's because of what you're eating." And I remember it really stuck out with me because I didn't want to hear any of that. I didn't want to make any of those changes because I knew it was a bigger issue than just what I was eating. It was more of like every time you put that food in your mouth, what are you really eating? Because it's not the food anymore. And those were questions that I did not want to ask, and those were answers that I did not want to hear.
But it was really interesting during this time, because now I'm going back into my memory, and while you were working out, it was funny because it was like while you're kind of telling yourself, like you're just doing it for the movement and you don't care about the weight, but at the same time, you all are having this conversation in which you're like, I don't see any results. Right. So there's this mixed signal, or just this lack of, I'm just be blunt, I don't know, lack of like internal honesty. That's like, well, what do you, because we did end up having that conversation, like, what do you really want?
Right. I never wanted to admit that it was the weight release. I never wanted to admit. Right. I was just like, I just want to move. There was always an excuse that I could put over it. Oh, I just want to be able to move. I just want to be free. I don't know,
Right.
kind of just
I just want to be strong.
But I never would say, yes, I want to release weight and I want to
Right.
be at this number, or I wanted to, be this fit or whatever it was. Because that felt, I'm trying to remember why. Because I'd have to change. I'd have to own it. If I said it, I'd have to own it. And I didn't want to own it. Then that would mean that I'd have to make some changes that I didn't want to do. Maybe I couldn't eat cheese, or I couldn't have that second glass of wine,
Right.
or you can't eat bread. Like, as soon as you tell me there's something I can't do or I can't have, even if it was something I never wanted.
Like a cat in a cage.
Right? I want it, and I am just, acting out like a 2-year-old. And I'm like, you can't tell me I can't have it. You don't get to tell me yes or no. I get to decide, right? I get all high and mighty. And I was absolutely 1,000% fighting for my limitations.
Yeah. So in 2019, you and our neighbor, you were walking consistently, but there weren't any changes physically.
Right. Well, we were walking, but in full disclosure, I mean, at this point, they were pretty leisurely walks. They were more counseling sessions than walks. I didn't make any changes to my diet.
Yeah.
And most importantly, I didn't make any changes to my mindset.
Right. So in 2020, you ended up setting an intention that set you up for your transformation.
Yes, I did. Unknowingly. Yeah, so in 2020, I got LASIK. I was talking to my mother, and I said, this is going to be the year that I see.
Well, tell people what LASIK is, just in case they don't know.
Oh, so LASIK is the eye surgery to take you from needing glasses or contacts to not. That is a huge shift in the way someone sees the world.
Yeah.
And I remember when I took them off for the first time and I looked around, it was as if I was seeing the world for the first time. And I remember I looked at you and I was like, is the world always this bright?
Yeah.
I was so shocked.
That's huge. That's really huge, because it's not just about like you seeing the world. This is about also you seeing yourself and seeing things about yourself that you can no longer deny.
Yes.
So throughout 2020, you got LASIK, but then there were more signs that happened in life that it was all conspiring for you to make this transformation. What was a big one?
Yeah, the universe was conspiring. So we're 2020. Everyone knows what 2020 was, right? 2020, the world shut down. And
the walks with our neighbor stopped.
Walks with the neighbors, with my neighbor friend. She's a very good friend now. We keep calling her neighbor, but she's a very good friend.
Don't want to reveal her identity.
Well, we won't. But anyway, they stopped, and alcohol consumption went up. Niles was homeschooled, so stress went up, and any small changes that I had made up into that point just completely fell off. And so Niles became He's
our 7-year-old. For those.
Niles is our 7-year-old son. For those that don't know, he became a giant spotlight for me on everything that I wanted to change, and so it was almost like the things that I did that were good for me and were just good to do, he internalized as something he didn't want to do. So for example, I would drink a lot of water. And he said to me one day, he calls me babe. And he'd say, babe, you drink a lot of water. And I said, yeah, I do. It's really important to be hydrated. Thinking this is a teachable moment. I'm teaching my son about hydration. And he looks at me and he says, yeah, I don't want to drink a lot of water because I don't want a big belly like that. Mm-hmm. And I was like, ow. I was like, okay.
Kids have a level of honesty that is refreshing, but it's also like deeply triggering.
It is. Yeah. I mean, it hurt because from his perspective, you drink all this water and then you get this belly, and he's like, and I don't want that, so I'm not going to drink all that water.
Right.
So it was clear that I wasn't the role model that I wanted to be for my son. And at this point, I was keenly aware of my knees hurting, getting out of breath, walking up the stairs. Niles asking me to play, and me finding all those excuses as to why I couldn't play. And it made me feel awful.
Yeah, I think think you started to get more reflective around like what's going to be Niles's narrative when he's older about his childhood.
That was a huge point of reflection for me because I started playing that over in my head, and the story that I came up with that Nas would say of his childhood was Babe was there, but she never could do anything. Right? And so it was like Babe could never play, Babe was always tired, something always hurt, she was always in pain. So she was there, but not really there.
Right. That became a huge motivating factor. And so the world was starting to open back up. You and our friend started to resume your walks.
Yeah,
but it was different this time.
It was well, not at first.
Oh, okay.
Not straight off, right out the box. So we said, about, I don't know, what's this, like maybe 6 months. And so we were talking and we're like, we need to get back at doing something. Right? So we decided that when the kids went back to school, we were going to resume our walks. So the kids go back to school and we resumed our walks maybe around August or September of 2020. Started with our walks again, but realized we're being more honest with ourselves, and we're like, we need to do more. And so my friend texted me one day and says, would you do CrossFit with me? And my first reaction was no. Well, my first reaction was yes, but I don't want to. And so in any event, we did it. She was like, let's just try it. And so I said, okay, I'll try it. So we signed up for it. Was like a free 7 days. And the first day, we went, you go hard, it's for an hour, and we felt great while we were doing it, right? All of that. Then fast forward to, that evening. Yeah. And like the next morning, and we were hurting so much so that we dreaded having to go to the bathroom because just sitting down was just excruciating pain. And so we went back the next day. I got injured. So it was moving really fast. We really didn't stretch at the end. And I pulled, I think I pulled my, I don't remember what this is called, but in the back.
Your hamstring?
My hamstring. And so, I couldn't work out because I couldn't walk. I couldn't bend, I couldn't go back. And so this was an opportunity that I could just fall off, right? An injury is almost like an exit.
Right. And then a lot of people do that. Think about a lot of people go balls to the wall. They're like, I'm going to change everything now. This is my year. This is my transformation. Go balls to the wall, do a 20-mile bike ride.
And then that's it.
And then that's it.
And I've been there, absolutely. Yeah. And I've done it. Right. And you just fall off. Oh, I did it. Great. And so this injury, even though I was not happy about it, it gave me an opportunity to refine my ask, refine my why. The biggest thing to me was I don't want to get an injury. So I started really slow. So it was the walks, and then eventually we upped it, right? So we started making those small incremental changes, but everything was, I'm not getting hurt.
Right. But you had a breakthrough.
I did. I was like, a breakthrough. I did. But this one particular day, it's 6 a.m., we're at the top of the hill, and this vision hit me like it was clear as day that I said, this is my loop. And
you were like yelling in the middle of the street.
That's why I said it was 6 a.m. Because I was hyped because it hit me. I had those epiphanies, those moments that you see on TV. That's what it felt like. It was just like, ah. And I was yelling to Laura. I was like, oh crap, I said her name.
It's fine.
But I was like, this is my loop. This is my loop. This is what I keep doing over and over and expecting a different result. And she asked me, she was like, okay. She's like, so.
Well, what's the loop?
Oh, so the loop is what we refer to. The loop is within our Calypso healing method. And the loop is essentially you just keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Whereas you keep doing it, you recognize you're doing it, and then you take an exit. Right. And you make a different choice to outshine your former self.
Right.
And so Laura said, okay, so are you going to do things differently? And honestly, I was like, I don't know. We'll find out. Because I don't know. How do I know?
Right.
Only my actions in the days to follow say if I'm ready to make a change or
Right.
not.
Right. And so Tammy takes a lot of time to think and to reflect.
Lot
She's
of
all in
time.
her head. So that was around August. Now it's January. She's
Well, it
still
wasn't
thinking
August.
about-
I mean, that was just the beginning when we started. This was probably like
Oh.
November.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it was
Okay.
chilly out. So
Okay.
this is probably like November.
So come January.
But I do take a lot of time to think and
Yes, you
process.
do.
I'll give you that.
So come January.
Yeah, so come January, I'm sitting on our bed and I'm
January of 2021.
January 2021, and this had been on me for a while. That I was like, I know that I have to make a bigger switch. I know something larger has to change in my life. And at the time, I would always, in like my social media feed, I would always see the new map and I would look at it and I'd be like, oh, because I didn't want to change. I'd be like, I don't need that. And finally, I was sitting there and I had a talk with myself. And I said, if you are really serious about making a change in your life, then you have to do something you've never done before to get a different result. And so on January 11th, 2021, I signed up for the new map, and according to their calculator that you put in your current weight, my current weight at that time was 220 pounds, and you say where you want to get to, and I just picked a number. There was no rhyme or reason. I picked 165. There was zero rhyme or reason to that number. That's just the number that popped into my head. And I think it said, I think it said July. It said July, you'd hit that number. And I was like, wow. Now, my first reaction was like, oh, fantastic. But the little voice inside was like, that's probably not going to happen. But that wasn't the point. The point was that it got me started, right? So January 11th, I signed up. I was 220 pounds. I was going to my goal of 165 pounds. And that was the first step on having different actions to get to the goal that I set. So let's just recap how this is a bit different. Yeah. This weight release part is different than the weight loss part, right? So I made a decision that made me uncomfortable. I wouldn't say I was happy about this decision. It
put you out of your comfort zone.
It took me out of my comfort zone. It stirred some things. I knew where I was starting. Right. Usually, sometimes I have an idea, but a lot of times I don't want to know. I wanted to live in oblivion.
Right. You had to get on the scale to plug into the app. This is your starting weight.
Right. Because it asks, what are you starting at? And yeah, I think they were even like, you can't skip this step. Right. Right. And so I knew where I was starting. And there wasn't someone for me to kind of outsource my progress to, which in the past, that's what a personal trainer was to me. I would pass the buck to them. Or
accountability. You couldn't outsource accountability.
Right.
Because it's just you and an app and you and yourself.
But even with a personal trainer, like you're accountable. They hold you accountable. Right. But for me, I didn't take ownership of it. Right. Right. It was all on them. You're going to get me. You said I could get to here. Fantastic. That is what made the beginning of this, what made it different.
Well, and there's a key element too, is that you were actually honest about your intent. Because we had that conversation.
I was.
That it's like, you said weight doesn't matter. You said the number doesn't matter. So which one is it?
The number mattered.
Right.
The weight mattered.
Right.
It did. I didn't want to believe it because I knew if I admitted that it mattered, then I was also admitting that I wasn't willing to do anything about it. And I didn't. Again, I think that's been a pretty clear message through this whole thing. I didn't want ownership. And I didn't want to have to admit, I wanted to be in oblivion. I wanted things to just poof, happen. And that was it.
Mhm.
But as history has told me, that didn't work for me. And
like in the admission that you want that the weight mattered, that the number mattered, there's also that admission of like there are behaviors within me that are not in alignment with this.
right, and I didn't want to admit that because this meant change. Right, and I don't like change. I fight it tooth and nail, right? But I would have to change, but more importantly, I would have to be honest with myself.
Right.
And for years, I didn't want to be honest with myself. I mean, 220, I used to just want to get to 200 pounds. I just wanted to, for a long time, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to get under 200 pounds. That was it. But I wasn't willing, and I can clearly remember those moments. I wasn't willing to do what was necessary, which
Mm-hmm.
is gradual changes.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I always did was these really big, sweeping changes. So I would think if I went out and I biked 10 miles, then I should drop 10 pounds, and that was it. If that works for somebody, that is fantastic. That does not and has not worked for me. Right. So I had to adopt a process that was in alignment with the way I operate in the world, which is slow and which is gradual and which allows me the time to process all the many thoughts and feelings that come up along the way.
That's the beauty of a slow process is that there's built in, if we accept the invitation of it, there's built in time for reflection and introspection and for us to really see like, are the actions I'm taking in support of where I say I want to go? But when you go lightning speed, when you go fast, you don't pay attention to those little details, and there's no time for that, like that internal shifting and changing.
Right.
Because you just want to go, 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 go. Get it done, get it fast,
Right.
It doesn't work. It's not sustainable.
Right. It wasn't sustainable for me. And so this time when I was aware of every little thing. So I call this my selfish period because I was very selfish about my time. This was probably maybe the first time in our relationship that I was
that she put the boundary
that I put the boundary up.
You watched our boundaries video.
That I put the boundary up and said, from 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. is my time. Right. It is my time, and nobody gets to intrude on that time. Actually, it was 5:30 to 6:30. No one got to intrude on that time, and I held that line. And then when I started making changes to the way I ate, I held that line too. This is how I eat. If you don't want to eat the same way I eat, that's fine. And so that's when I started taking more ownership. So that's when Selima would always be the cook in the house, right? Whatever Selima cooked is kind of what we ate. But we were in two different places. Yeah. And so I had to make my own food. This was my own food, and I had to probably the biggest thing was I had to make my own plate. Yep. So, Selima would cook, and then she would make our plates, and, we'd sit down and eat. But Selima actually has a much bigger appetite than I do. I actually don't need a whole lot of food. And so the plates that she would make for me would be they'd be pretty high. But I always felt the obligation to eat all of it. Right. And so I wouldn't pay attention to hunger cues. I wouldn't pay attention to, is this really what I want? I wouldn't pay attention to how many vegetables I had on my plate. It was just kind of like, Selima gave it to me, I got to eat it. And so when we stopped that and I just made my own plate, it really helped me get in touch with what do I really want? How do I eat? What makes me feel satisfied and full? But it was also like doing that whole process was really great for me because it also made me slow down with eating. So it made me realize what an emotional and mindless eater I was. So I talked about the relationship with food, and for a period I weighed my food and I tracked my food. I also weighed myself every single day. Even to this day, I still weigh myself every single day. I've never missed a day. I'll even travel with the scale so that
run to the store, get batteries. If
I
the
have.
scale dies.
But what I have now,
Yeah.
I still, and at the time of recording this video, I still have not hit that original goal. I am 1 pound from that original goal, but my mindset is completely different. I mean, I went through a period in which I was on a plateau for 6 months.
Hovering around 178.
Yeah, right. I hovered at 178 for 6 months.
Right. Most people will quit.
I mean, it's not like I wouldn't get upset and I'd come out and I say, Selima, it's so blah, blah, blah. But my mind was not the same. I was not in the same place. Right. Maybe I hadn't hit the goal that I had set out to yet, but so much had changed along the way that plateau wasn't as painful as it may sound, because my relationships were completely different at that point. And that was with not even hitting my goal, right? My relationship with Niles, infinitely better.
Yeah.
Right? My relationship with myself, I continued to keep gradually pushing myself to an outer limit of finding and adjusting. Like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. So, I knew I wasn't gonna weigh my food forever.
Right.
Right? So I was like, I have to try. I have to see, but I have to trust myself in order to do that. Right? My relationship with Selima, because my self-confidence went up, grew stronger. I remember I watched an episode of This Is Us, and there was an episode where Jack went to like a karate something with Randall, and one of the exercises was to put your kid on your back and do push-ups. And I remember watching that and saying, I want to be able to do that with Niles. And during this time, I was able to do that. I was like, Niles, get on my back. I want to see if I can do a push-up with you. And these are the memories that we grow together, right? When Niles is like, let's do push-ups, babe, or let's work out, babe.
Or let's wrestle.
Or let's wrestle and
let's
race. And, I'm like, let's do it. And he and I are wrestling, and I'm picking him up and throwing him across the room. And, the relationships have just blossomed, and they're everything that I've always wanted them to be, but would never happen if I didn't bring in the presence and the inner knowing of myself.
And the honesty.
And that's not always easy.
So do you ever feel triggered now in ways that make you want to put the weight back on?
I would say probably not so much now. Maybe if you asked me that question, maybe like while I was in my plateau, where I felt like this could still be shaky, probably then. But like just in our Calypso healing method, I feel like I've hit the point of outshining my former self.
Right.
Because life has started lifing.
Right.
And I haven't fallen off.
Yeah.
And that's generally like an easy spot to fall off. And I haven't.
I think it also makes a difference too when people can see the difference in yourself. Like for now, like you falling off a couple of days, you would really feel the difference in your body and not feel great about it.
I do feel the difference.
Right.
Because I have.
Right.
This is not to say that, never. No, I absolutely have fallen off for a couple of days. And at the end of day 2, I have a talk with myself. And I was like, ooh, nope, this can't happen. You're going to get up and you're going to do this. You're going to do that. This is what you're going to eat. Because fall-offs happen.
Yeah.
And to sit here and say they don't just wouldn't be an honest representation of life.
Right.
Right? But what I do is, even if I don't feel like I have it in me for a full workout, then I always ask myself, well, what do you have it in you to do?
Right.
And that's what you do. Because the one thing that is a non-negotiable for me is complete lack of movement.
Right.
Right? So I might not go and do like super hard in my weights and all of that, but I might do like a slow yoga flow because I feel like I need to stretch. I feel like I'm a little too tight, and that is going to be more beneficial. So I have come up with this whole like little mixing pot that I don't feel like I don't get to do what I want. I don't feel like I don't get to eat what I want. I don't feel like my whole life is just dictated by this very regimented schedule.
Right.
It's not like that at all. I eat everything that I want, and I do everything that I want. I'm
mindfully.
It's really just kind of trying to keep it balanced because I don't want it to fall all the way on one side and I don't want it to fall all the way on the other side. I want balance. And when I could admit that that was what mattered the most to me, balance, that's when everything fell into place.
Yeah. I think you brought up, you've said this word a couple of times, and I think it's important to point out is that adjustment. So many people will try to just stick to, here's one plan, and I'm going to stick to this plan, and I'm going to be really rigid about it because they say this is what should work. But along the way, we have to make adjustments. Every time when you realize you plateaued in moving, you all made an adjustment. When you plateaued with food, you made an adjustment. I think that's a really key point to note.
And it's also knowing yourself. So I also made adjustments because I get bored. And if I get bored, that's a sure, I mean, you can almost guarantee that I'm going to go in the other direction. And so, you know, again, I was honest with myself about that and knowing that I am always changing things up. So for example, my exercise routine, that got changed recently. Well, not recently, maybe like the last 3 months or whatever. I was getting bored. I was running. I think I was running and rowing, and I was getting bored with it. So instead, I said, you know what? This isn't working for me. I said, I'm not going to work out an hour. I only work out 30 minutes, and I chunk that 30 minutes up into 10-minute segments of doing 10 minutes of 3 different exercises. Well, 3 different types of exercises. Because after 10 minutes, I noticed I start checking out. I'm less mindful. I'm bored. I don't want to do this anymore. And when I'm bored, your mind just kind of goes wherever. And I want to stay present. And
so what's some advice that you can give for people? Just key points to remember if you're on your weight release journey.
You got to take ownership of your own process. You got to be honest with yourself and ask those hard questions that you might not want to answer and then answer them out loud.
That is helpful.
Yeah. Saying things out loud, you can't unhear them. And so that is why you say it out loud. Acknowledge the way you speak to yourself. And change it. You know, don't belittle yourself and don't be like, oh, you're so stupid or that's not going to help anybody. That's not how you would talk to your partner or your kid or your best friend. So don't talk to yourself that way either. And show up every single day for yourself in big and small ways. You deserve to take up space, so do it. And admit when you need help. I like to put it all on my shoulders and go it alone and, you know, be the pack mule. And I had to realize that if I wanted to go far, I needed help. And I had decided, and it took a long time for me to decide that I wanted to go far. And when I decided I needed to go far, I realized that I needed help. The caveat is help does not mean doing it for you. I ate mindfully when I realized that I could just sit down and just eat. And the thing that really brought it home was when I would go and put my finger back into the bowl or the chip or whatever and realize it was empty. And I'd be like, oh, I didn't even know that was my last one. I would have savored it more. And it was like, well, you would have known it was your last one if you were paying attention. So it was those kind of things that happened in life that I became more aware of and realized I am not present in my actions and I'm not present in the decisions that I'm making of what I'm fueling my body with. And then, you know, if you're someone that strenuous exercise is your jam, I mean, do you? It's not my jam, and I think
Not
that's
every day, but you do strenuous exercise.
not every day.
Yeah.
But I think the whole thing with exercise is find what works for you.
Right.
Find what you can do on a consistent basis,
Right.
and just start there. And I truly believe that eventually, whatever it is, you will want to do more of what works for you. For example, I love lifting weights. I love feeling stronger. I don't necessarily enjoy cardio. I don't really enjoy running and doing all that. So I make a decision for me, and I do it because I know I can stick with it. Because again, what is at the forefront is longevity, sustainability, and balance.
Yeah. So if you're looking for a comprehensive herbal program that prioritizes mental and emotional well-being, then consider ours, Herbal Medicine for the Soul. It's a self-paced online mentorship program where we're not only training future herbalists and medical practitioners on herbal medicine, but we're also teaching you how to break the cycle so that you heal the cycles of chronic physical pains, mental illness, pills, and side effects using herbal medicine, medical astrology, the Calypso healing method. The link is below. Check it out if it resonates, and see you inside if it does.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.